This is my review of The Last of Us Part 2. I know I'm pretty late to the party on this one. Also, unlike many people who enjoy video games, I haven't actually played the original or watched the TV show. Because I only have a vague idea of what happened in the first game, I can't really be upset with how they developed the characters from that part of the story. Before I start, I should mention that while I'm not trying to spoil anything here, there will inevitably be spoilers ahead. So spoiler warning. This is a story-based game, and I really enjoyed most of the story. It was definitely convoluted and chaotic, but in a way where it felt like life. How life can be convoluted and chaotic when a lot's going on. So many of the characters in this story are deep and multidimensional. While most of the characters in the game have no dimensionality, the sheer number of complex characters here is very high. More so than most video games, or even film, books, and TV. An example is Dina. She's in love with Ellie, and will follow her to the end of the earth because of that love. But deep down, Dina wants Ellie to go back before she completes her goal of revenge, to save her from its inevitable nasty conclusion. Though Dina loves Ellie, she's constantly teasing her and one-upping her. Also, it seems like Dina has some vague feelings for her ex-boyfriend who got her pregnant, and this appears to make Ellie jealous, though she doesn't show it to anyone. And this is just a little bit about Dina. There's a lot of these complex characters in this game. Though the story is chaotic, not all of it is chaotic. The way Ellie and Abby's stories parallel each other is very powerful and a cool plot device. It is a well thought out story structure. They're both out for revenge on the killers of their father figures in their life, and they both experience similar trials and tribulations. I like that they set up the story this way, and let you play as both characters. You get to see all the gray areas, and are able to empathize with both characters. When talking about the story, I can't avoid discussing a pretentious-sounding term. Ludonarrative dissonance. If you haven't heard of this already, in video games, this means when the narrative in a cutscene doesn't really match up with the narrative being told in the gameplay. And this game is the poster child for exactly that. Ellie has many cutscenes where she comes off as a character who's kind and empathetic in her character traits. But in the game, she's a psychopathic mass murderer, who not only kills tons of people without empathy, who she doesn't personally know anything about, but she also does it with some joy. I know this kind of violence isn't uncommon in video games. Even Mario kills innocent Goombas. And he even possesses his enemies as a psychic parasite not unlike cordyceps fungi that The Last of Us infection is modeled after. The developers of this game even appear to reference this senseless violence by having a character who's playing Hotline Miami, which is a game that contains a lot of food for thought on senseless violence in games, and is also a great game. But heartless violence seems quite at odds with the heartfelt story being told, and with the cutscenes that ask you to identify with Ellie and like her. She swears at the people she kills, while their comrades yell out their names in grief. It's pretty jarring if you don't separate the two stories in your mind. And there doesn't appear to be a way through the game without killing lots of people, despite the game largely being a stealth-based game. Ellie is a modern brand of anti-hero, the cognitive dissonance anti-hero. All that said, I like her, and I think she's a pretty compelling character. And despite her being the villain for much of the story, I liked Abby as well. There are some brilliantly emotional moments in this game. For example, the scene where Ellie and Joel visit a dinosaur and space museum. It felt like I was really watching a father interact with a teenage daughter, with all the awkwardness and warmth inherent in this relationship. I do realize that Joel isn't really her father. I know there were some critiques out there of the political content of the story. I don't want to get too deep into identity politics criticisms of this game because, to be honest, that's something I have very little interest in talking about. Are there a lot of masculine women in this game? Yeah. Do some parts of the story linger a little too long on identity? Maybe. Do either of these things bother me personally? No. I think it's interesting to see all sorts of stories in art. I also understand that sometimes a large portion of an audience can feel like they are being ignored or actively subverted. My general takeaway here is that it's sad when people who might like each other in person are divided by this stuff. What I did find a bit silly about the characters' identities was that a lot of them seem pretty dorky for the post-apocalyptic world. Dorky is cool, but I would think that the survivors would be more hardened after dealing with all the stuff in the story. On to another thing I didn't love was Abby's sex scene, which I found a bit jarring. It didn't show anything too graphic, but it was done in a way that felt graphic. I think they could have cut the scene a bit earlier. After playing her character for a while, it was just kind of uncomfortable to watch, but that's just my opinion. Others might feel differently, and I understand that. While this game was largely about humans, the infected zombies were there, and I loved their design. This may sound completely crazy, but I like sci-fi and zombie stories that are believable. I like it when it's easy to suspend my disbelief. One thing that's always really bothered me about some modern zombie stories is how years later zombies are still in hordes, when much of the human population is dead. It seems obvious that these rotting corpses would disintegrate over time, and there would be less and less zombies. The infected in The Last of Us get around this fantastically. These are humans infected with living fungus. Thus their bodies are sewn together with a web of mycelium, mycelial fibers. They are fungus, and thus can continue to grow and live long after the bodies they're inhabiting, have been eaten away. It warms my heart to see this fix. Let's talk about gameplay. The gameplay is great. It's great. This game is so fun. I could hunt down zombies one by one with stealth, run out and kill them face to face, or stealth kill a few and make a break for the next checkpoint, running like hell, avoiding having to fight. Lots of cool options in what weapons to use as well, and how to use them. It's a very satisfying combat system. The infected add other layers with their weird abilities, immunities, and weaknesses. The one part of the gameplay I didn't like was the semi-open world portion, where you're exploring an enemy city. It started to drag. I don't love open world games because of their repetitiveness and menial tasks. And this open world was exactly that. I think the more linear parts of the game that were carefully crafted and that really progressed the story were better. They didn't even feel that linear because the game gave you the illusion of choice while it was funneling you in a certain direction. The open world parts felt very samey, and I got tired of them quick. Luckily, this isn't most of the game, but I think it would have been far better if this part was shortened or removed. Speaking of which, this game was too long for its own good. It needed a harsh editor to tighten it up. There were some little parts in this game that didn't need to be in the gameplay, like herding sheep at one point, but this is a minor critique, and the gameplay was mostly really fun. I should mention that if you're someone who adores dogs and can't handle anything bad happening to them, this game might be tough for you at times. You kill a lot of attack dogs. These dogs have the ability to sniff you out when you're hiding. There are also some sweet moments with dogs when you're playing as Abby as well. As for performance, I'm the last person in the world to ask, since I don't usually notice performance issues. I was playing using a PlayStation 4 disc on a PS5, and I had no real problems. I did experience one glitch that was frustrating. I got knocked back by an enemy and clipped inside a shipping crate as Abby and couldn't get out. I then accidentally saved over my last autosave and lost a ton of progress. After this experience, I would recommend saving manually often. The graphics in this game are fantastic, beautiful. The facial animations are the best I've seen in any game I've played up to this point. A+ on graphics. That was my addition to the chorus of opinions, the cacophony of opinions. Cacophony? On this game. I like giving games a somewhat arbitrary numerical score, so overall I give this game an 8.5 out of 10, and it feels like my opinion is somewhere in between Donkey and Nakey Jakey. I recommend it.